Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Big 12 Mafia Show here on the College Football Mafia Network. I am, of course, Monavision. To my left or my right, depending on which way you're looking, is Will Do. We're filling in for Bomber. Bomber is unfortunately have some side effects from his surgery, so he could not make it today. A little later in the show, we're going to be joined by Mark Zanetto of at Locked On UConn, the Locked On UConn podcast. We're going to break down the Big 12 UConn rumors. How does UConn fit in the Big 12? How does the Big 12 fit in UConn? So,
Right.
Get to that. It's been an exciting week zero. Excuse me, week zero. What were your thoughts on the weekend? You?
Wow. 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 Shocking. Everyone's shocked about that result. What a way to kick off the regular season. It's what hasn't been talked about much is how much this changes the landscape for the ACC and the Big 12. That Florida State loss opens the door, I think, for two Big 12 teams to maybe get into the playoff. That's how big a deal that was. That's not getting any play at all. But when you're talking about a brand like Florida State losing in a conference game, right there, that's going to be one of the teams that's right ahead of you probably for that second playoff spot. So it was a crazy game. I think that the Big 12 scored, though, and the Big 12 actually benefited with that Florida State loss. But it was shocking, certainly. And kudos to Georgia Tech. Rec Talk was on our channel on Friday. He dropped it down, man. He told us exactly what was going to happen. He didn't even think the win was going to happen for the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck. But, man, what a game. What a game. So kudos to him.
Yeah, and we talked about it on Sunday. I won all four of my dog picks. I picked all four dogs covered. So we're going to hopefully keep that rolling. We're going to reveal our picks for the week on Friday. We do have at least, I think, one Thursday game in there, but we're going to pick everything by tomorrow, and we'll reveal our picks for Friday on the Friday show. And then we've also got our Pigskin Pick'em. I will post that link in chat. And make sure you guys get your picks in by Wednesday because there are Thursday games on there as well. So make sure you get your let me try and find that link. Make sure you get your picks in on that Pigskin Pick'em by Wednesday.
I'll tell you what, we've got football, Big 12 football coming up on Thursday, Moan. We've got 4 freaking games on Thursday in 2 days. So we've got to talk about those briefly on this show today because on Friday, obviously, it's going to be a little too late for those of the results and everything. So let's do it. I think we should get into those really quick and stuff and give thoughts on really where those games are going to swing. Are you okay with that for 5-10 minutes?
Yep. All let's do that while we'll wait for Mark.
Let's do it. Okay, let me share screen here. 1 sec. All right. Okay, so check it out. So Thursday, August 29, 2024, we got 4 Big 12 football games. We've got New Hampshire at UCF, Lindenwood at Kansas, and that's going to be at the Children's Mercy Park. I mean, I don't know where that's being played out. It must be some type of soccer field. Then a couple big ones. This one's actually pretty competitive. North Dakota State at Colorado, then Southern Utah at Utah. So, Moan, first impression. So let's talk about this UCF game. You think that UCF's going to have any issues?
No. I mean, I think the only game that has any intrigue for Thursday is North Dakota State versus Colorado. We want to see how Colorado's improved. North Dakota State had an injury to their top safety, who was considered a first-round draft pick, potentially. So we'll see how that impacts them on defense. A lot of portal transfers coming into Colorado. How did they gel?
Oh, my goodness. That is the question of all questions. I mean, it's a little bit of a mind bender to kind of figure out this game. Like before that injury happened to North Dakota State, a lot of folks were picking them.
Yeah.
But when you're losing like your best player for North Dakota State, an FCS All-American, my understanding, that is a big deal. There's not too many of those type of players on that squad. Colorado has a 10-point favorite in that game, over under 60.5. I'm taking the Buffs, given that injury.
I'm taking the Buffaloes too. And that money line has trended more towards Colorado. It was down earlier to 8.5 points, Colorado, and now it's It's went up to 10. So obviously that injury to the North Dakota State safety had an impact on that. But I would love to see that a North Dakota State upset of a FCS upsetting an FBS team.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I love to see that. It's gonna for this conference though. We need to win these kind of games though,
Yeah,
right? Like, so as intriguing as that would be for Colorado to lose to North Dakota State, if you're a Big 12 supporter, we really can't afford that. We need Colorado to win a lot of games, to be on TV, to get maximum viewership. So we got to have the Bucks to win this one. At least go into Lincoln and lose, right? But not this game. So get it done, Colorado. Should be an easy one for UCF, KU. Southern Utah's playing at Utah, going to that game Thursday night. So I'm looking forward to that. So should be a sharp Utah victory too, though. I'm hoping the Big 12 goes 4-0 here.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like about this is ESPN Plus has 3 of the games.
Man, I tell you what, that sucks. That sucks bad. I don't have ESPN Plus as
Neither
of today.
do I.
And so
I do not either. So I would, I'm imagining all these other 3 games are going to be blowouts. I think the closest one was like 37.5 was the spread. So I'm not going to be too disappointed that I'm missing them. I think the Colorado North Dakota State game is going to be the most competitive of them. But
yeah, I think so too.
Mercy Park is Kansas City's professional soccer team, their MLS soccer team.
There we go. MLS. Look, the Jayhawks are playing everywhere this year, just not at their home field here. Arrowhead, at Mercy Park. So get it done, Jayhawks. Take care of Lindenwood.
Let's go down to Friday. Oh, we want to pull that back up? Or
yeah, I'll put it back.
I wanted to see the Friday and Saturday games as well.
Here we go. All right, let's go down. On Friday, we've got
TCU and Stanford. And this is an interesting one because the money line has moved down. It was at 10.5 to start for TCU, and it has moved down to 9. I like TCU in that game.
I like TCU a lot in that game. Stanford, I just don't think has the horses yet. They don't have the talent there. Troy Taylor, their coach, is a good coach, but I'm just not sure he's ever going to really turn that program around to be what it once was with, Harbaugh there. So, yeah, I know they're going to California. It looks like that game's at Stanford. I still take the Horned Frogs. I think the Horned Frogs are probably the most slept-on team in the Big 12 Conference. Seriously, I mean, this team is the most talented team according to the 24/7 composite rating. Like across the board, has more high-caliber talent. The highest recruiting rankings are from TCU, seriously. So this team, we'll see how they do, but I think they could outperform this year for sure.
And then we're talking about, we'll give you the picks. We won't reveal our picks yet. But let's talk a little bit Penn State at West Virginia. West Virginia is unranked.
My goodness, this is the freaking game for the Big 12. This is a week 1 game. It's the one that you got to have. It's the biggest game. Oh, man. This one, like if West Virginia could pull off this upset versus Penn State, I think that it's a perception bender, a perception changer for this conference. So it looks like Penn State has an 8-point line right now. West Virginia just can't keep it close. They've got to win this one. If it's a point, if it's 7, if it's 10, I don't care. Just West Virginia needs to win this football game because I think this is a perception painter, 100%.
I don't even necessarily think they have to win. I think if they make it close, that's a perception winner as well. I know there's no such thing as a moral victory, but sometimes, maybe just playing them close could be a boost to it. The other big one, South Dakota State at Oklahoma State. All these FCS schools from the Dakotas and Montana, they are built to win, and they travel. Right. So, again, though, ESPN Plus.
Yeah, there's a lot of ESPN Plusers looking at the docket and everything. So, going to have to get ESPN Plus ordered out real soon here, Moan, as a K-State and Utah fan. But, yeah, you're right, though. That Oklahoma State, that South Dakota State game, like – Oklahoma State dropped one last year in a very similar type of circumstance. And so you can't get caught looking ahead. I think they realize that 100%. They're not. They're an experienced team with a very good trench play. I think Oklahoma State wins that game, but I do think it's going to be fairly close.
Yeah, and like Jeff Woodworth brings up in the chat, Nevada should have beat SMU, Mountain West team against SMU. So
exactly,
you never know. This is, I don't see Tarleton State upsetting Baylor or UT Martin upsetting Kansas State, but there might be an upset in here somewhere. New Mexico, after their tough loss, they got to go and play Arizona. That one's on ESPN. That's a night game in the desert. That should be
don't like this
interesting.
game. I don't like this Wyoming,
Don't like Wyoming
Arizona
and Arizona State.
No, I don't know why any Big 12 or Pac-12, former Pac-12 school plays Wyoming. Wyoming will just slug you in the face. If you ever go up to Laramie, it's just a hard place to win. It's a weird place. And, like, it just beats the crap out of you playing the Wyoming Cowboys. Like, it's hard to get up for those guys, and they slug you. And they beat you sometimes. So, like, I just don't like that game at all. It's one of those sneaky games that Arizona State really needs to take care of.
I like Arizona State in that game. It's in the desert, 6.5 point spread. I think Arizona State can win by a touchdown or more. So, but those are the Big 12 games we have for this week. Obviously, we'll talk more about it when we reveal our picks on Friday. But the biggest one there, Penn State at West Virginia, 10 a.m. start time on Fox. I think that you're probably set to Mountain Time.
That's a Mountain Time right there. Yep, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, so 12 p.m. Eastern Time for that game. Look, that is the biggest non-conference game for the Big 12 in the whole season docket. There's nothing bigger than this one. Big Noon's going to be there. It's really time for Garrett Green to show out and this West Virginia team to show out. You're underdogs. You're at home. They need to do something crazy here and win this game. I think they can do it too. So we will see, though. We'll talk about it more on Friday.
Yeah, Big Noon kickoff's going to be there, so I'm sure Morgantown will be rocking. The atmosphere will be electric. So did you catch any of the other games other than Florida State, Georgia Tech this weekend?
I caught a little bit of that New Mexico game, but it was the first half before they blew that lead. To see Bronco Mendenhall's face was an interesting thing. He used to be the former BYU coach.
Yeah, they performed well for him, defensively especially. I was rooting hard for Nevada to beat SMU, and they fell apart there at the end. The kid muffed that punt return or kick return and set him up to get a safety, and then they just could never get rolling again. So let's say hello to some people in chat. Let's do some shout outs. We can stop talking for a while. Nathan Campbell's here. He says, "Hi guys, good to see you, Nathan." The Evil Badger, Ryan Willie, is here. Good to see you, Ryan. Stormy Cyclone's here. Good to see you, Stormy. The Big Lubbock is here. Good to see you, Big Lubbock. From the Big Ten Mafia show, it's Sergeant Pickles.
Pickles.
Jeff Woodworth says UConn, Kansas, Arizona, and Houston in the same conference, along with Baylor, West Virginia, and Iowa State. This basketball conference makes SEC football look like ACC football.
It's a great comment. It is a great comment. We're going to get into it really, really deep with Mark. He's the one who actually broke the story on Locked On UConn about 9 days ago or so. So we're going to talk about 10, 15 minutes ago with Mark, and we're going to get real deep and stuff on the pros, the cons, what this can mean for UConn and the Big 12, and if it makes sense. Like, we're really going to dive. So looking forward to that conversation coming up here.
Both balls, football and basketball. We will be balls deep. So Stormy Cyclone says, "I understand everyone's excitement over UConn to the Big 12, but future media partners in Fox and CBS are opposed to this, so I can see why presidents are on the fence."
Yep, exactly. That's one of the many reasons right there.
BR7062 is in the house. Says UConn or Con U.
Cheers to that, BR.
Nice wordplay there. James. Just James. Maybe Utah will try to be good at basketball again.
James, come on, James. Yeah, Utah's basketball programs. say that they've been better before. Utah's focus, I'll be honest with you guys, all the Utah focus is on football. It really is like football, football, football. If basketball has to take a back seat, no problem at all. It's going to be a focus on football. It's going to continue being that way. That's one of the hard parts about the UConn ad. As a Ute fan, Ute supporter, Ute communities and everything, the administration, like you're kind of moving in a way that you don't want to be moving if you're the Utes, to be honest with you.
See, MBM with quite the profile picture, Oklahoma logo and the state of Texas upside down. UConn basketball only, Boise State football. Interesting.
Throwing it down.
Mr. Monkey says Kansas Jayhawks is not sure UConn fans want to be in the Big 12. We don't need another Utah.
That's something we're going to ask Mark right there. It's a good comment, Mr. Monkey. We don't know exactly where UConn the fan base stand with the move. Like you hear some folks on X and everything pushing back on it. But is that really the case? Do they understand? Do UConn fans really understand the landscape of college athletics? Because like based on some of the things that I've seen, it doesn't seem like they realize there's actually this house settlement going on right now and that they can't fund their basketball program anymore if they don't go to the Big 12, which is completely mind-boggling. Like it's just to see that, like for survival, they need to get into a bigger conference because $10 million, $8 million in the Big East on that media contract ain't gonna do it. Guess what, everybody? I just checked this out today. Utah basketball made more money than UConn basketball last year. Utah basketball made more money. It was more profitable than UConn basketball last year as far as revenue generation goes for the basketball
That's excluding
program.
NCAA tournament credits.
It's getting close.
Yeah.
Right there. When you're throwing in NCAA tournament credits, I think UConn got about $4 or $5 million for the last fiscal year in because they won it, right? But really, you're looking at like the media revenues, the ticket revenues, and everything. It's not like it's a world away. In fact, Utah generates more revenue on the basketball side. As far as ancillary values, I mean, there's a lot that UConn brings to the table, but just to lay it out there a little bit.
BR7062 says all Big 12 teams win this week. That's a bold prediction.
Love
it. Test subject 38. UConn can join in all except football. Football, they join the MAC with UMass and play with the new media deal, helps with TV exposure and some money. So there's an option for you. And then we got Conundrum says skip UConn football, add UConn basketball and Lindenwood football. I don't even know where Lindenwood is.
Where is Lindenwood? Does anybody know where Lindenwood is? And
it
speaking of
like
Lindenwood,
that made-up high school team from Ohio that plays.
Yeah.
Is it even real? Come on, James.
Lindenwood's got to be a real college. It's got to be a real college, right?
I would assume so, but I've never heard of it.
KU, please just destroy them. Don't make it a close game. We don't need any Lindenwood jokes.
Lindenwood joined the Ohio Valley Conference last year. The Lions are in the St. Louis area. So there you go. Lindenwood Lions are from St. Louis. Apparently they're a hockey school too. Jeff Woodward says Lindenwood could bring their hockey to Big 12 because the Big 12 needs hockey.
So Lindenwood has, maybe we should look at Lindenwood as an expansion candidate with UConn.
There you go. Shonsky says, wow, dude, I have ESPN Plus. You're more than welcome to come over and watch the game.
There we go.
You got much better seats. You're going to be in Rice Eccles. So. TCU should beat Stanford even on the road. I agree.
Yeah.
Go Frogs. I agree. And Florida State should have beaten Georgia Tech. Yes, they should have. West Virginia by 3. That's a bold prediction. ESPN Plus equals the Big 12 network. It's not the same. Not the same. Shonsky is very fond of ESPN Plus. It's a great network. He loves it.
You know what is really funny, though? That the Big Ten network couldn't get distribution on Comcast. Do you know how long we battled? Seriously, the Pac-12 with those guys? They would never capitulate.
They
Moan.
will be on
What's
there by Saturday. They'll be on there by Saturday.
Moan? I'm serious. Like those guys are so hard to negotiate with. Like we couldn't get it done. The distribution, like it is crazy how it's happening again.
Trust me, when those games come USC on the Big Ten Network, and when they start putting some bigger games on there, you'll see it. It'll happen. You forgot a Big 12 game, UConn at Maryland. I guess they're already in the conference according to you guys. So,
what is the
and then
spread
speaking
to
of
UConn
Maryland,
and Maryland? Yeah, what is the spread?
Jeff, a Maryland guy, obviously says, "What's up? Good to see you, Jeff." Antoine Code says, "Will the West Coast big customers drop Comcast to get the Big Ten Network?" Like I said under Bob Thompson's post, YouTube TV, Sling, Fubo, they'll be right there to collect that money that Comcast doesn't want. Jay Baller says ASU won't cover against Wyoming. Serious question. Does Utah play baseball?
They sure do. Yeah, Utah's baseball team is pretty good too. It's no slouch. And softball.
David Frayne says, as a Mountaineer fan, I'm fine with UConn joining the Big 12, but if it doesn't happen by Monday evening, then it's never happened. I think he means this Monday.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would ask, why does it need to be done by this Monday? I know there's like a 27-month window where they need to leave and like ramp out of the Big East. Is Monday significant for that development?
Tony Washington says Fox just signed a basketball deal with the Big East. They want UConn to stay. We'll bring that up with the guest. Buckshot Kid says, I want to see UConn football in the MAC. Yeah, I'm sure they would love some action out there in the East Coast. Some game on a random Wednesday at 10 o'clock. The Big Lubbock says, don't count out Texas Tech in basketball. Here's a
Never
good
count those
point
guys.
from Illini Ted. I think UConn fans are worried that by focusing on football, their basketball teams take a step back.
It's 100% true, Illini Ted. You just nailed it. Your thinking is right on. You, as a school, can have a primary focus. Is it going to be on football or is it going to be on basketball? And if you try to be great at both of them, it typically doesn't work out very well, and you become mediocre at both. UConn is a basketball school. All they care about is basketball. They basically have to have its football program to facilitate basketball, supporting the basketball program. So will basketball suffer in the Big 12? That is a huge concern that I've got. Will UConn be the same when they're not playing other Northeast schools? How about recruiting in the Big 12 versus the Big East? Big concerns. Big concerns. Are they going to be the same? Or are they going to take a step back in the Big 12 conference?
Expedition Greg says, hey, everyone. Good to see you, Expedition Greg. J Baller 54 heard today that UConn athletic department is losing 30 to 40 million per year. That ain't good. Stormy Cyclone, the reason the UConn edition is trying to be fast tracked is because of the 27-month withdrawal window.
Mm-hmm.
Nick M says, have y'all talked about SMU running the table and winning the ACC yet? No, we did. We deal in facts here on the channel, not fantasy. Jay Baller says, just some crazy stuff about them today. Number one, they only get $5 million revenue payout. Only one of two independents football. Yeah, and the other independent's Notre Dame. So,
should we take a look-see at the UConn financials real quick?
we can.
You know, I'm always curious about this, just to look at where like their money's coming from. It's important. Walk you guys through this, guy. Here we go. All right, here we go. We're on Sportico. This is the best website to actually break out this stuff. We're looking at the revenue, the sales that UConn's athletic department's making. And you can look at the big breakouts. Sportico is kind enough to break things out by football, men's basketball, women's basketball, other sports, and then a category that's very curious named non-sport specific. That is encompassing things like direct institutional support. So this is just a high level. Okay, so UConn's football team netted the school $6 million last year. Football, $6 million. Men's basketball, about 10.6 million. Women's basketball, 4.4 million. Each other sports, 4.2. And the most of the funding sources that came from UConn, 67% or 67, same with 68 million, basically everything came from this non-sport specific item. If you look to the right side, you can see where that's coming from. That's coming from direct institutional support and donations. So UConn's program has been funded by the school itself and sponsors, donations. That's what's funding the basketball program right now. Because the basketball program, Mona, are you still following me? Or are we moving a little too fast?
No, keep going. I'm watching.
Okay. So the basketball program, we're going to scroll down a little bit and look at its expenses. Like, okay, these are the sales that the athletic department is making in the different areas. And as you can see, its football program, expense-wise, spent $20 million and only earned $6 million. So its football program is actually at a negative $14 million deficit at the moment. Well, as of the last fiscal year in, this is 2022, 2023. Its basketball program earned about 11 million and spent about 14 million. And then you can see these other, expense columns and everything, coaching salaries. But the big takeaway is like, hey, UConn's making this move. We all know why, but here is proof positive, 100% factual. This is why they have to. Because how long can direct institutional support fund your basketball program? Even if you're the best basketball program in the world, which you are, you have to be able to create revenues and be self-sustaining without being a drain on the school itself or your athletic department. So that UConn cannot afford to remain in the Big East Conference, to sum it up, if they're going to continue being competitive, especially in this new house settlement era where expenses are going to be more significant than they are during this period that we're looking at. It's really clear cut on what's going on here from UConn's perspective. They can't afford not to be in a Power Four conference.
Well, Jason Spangler says he has a bone to pick with you, but UConn basketball made more than $6 million. Toss that website out. Sportico is Sportico, guys. It's, they're not our numbers. Sportico put them out there.
Yeah.
And I trust Sportico.
Sportico is pulling this information from financial reports from the public universities. So you can go on Knight Newhouse, too. That's another site that you can find this information. It's pretty organized. So Sportico or Knight Newhouse are the two sources you want to go to. Another source, if you're looking for private school information, is EADA. Go EADA, search for university, and that is a nonprofit organization that monitors the revenues of private schools. Those are the three ways that you can get financial information on the school in an easy way and fashion without going and reading all of their financial statements. And this basically sums it up. And this tells a pretty clear story, again, with UConn. And let's leave it at that.
We got a Connecticut fan in chat says, no way UConn will even consider Big 12 without football. Sorry, guys.
Oh, I totally agree with you. It's not even worthwhile for UConn to consider the Big 12 without football. Really,
they have to have football right away?
Oh, so football right away. So, no way UConn comes over to the Big 12 without getting paid its full distribution, in other words. That doesn't seem like it's a possibility, given all the reporting that we've heard and everything. And given the fact that we just looked at some of the information there with the financial statements for UConn and everything, I don't know. The football program only made $6 million in revenues in 2022 and 2023. Most of the Big 12 schools are in the 70, 60 million to 70, 80, 90 million and maybe 100 million in revenues for football. We're in a completely different world and everything. So UConn's going to have to ramp up a lot to get even competitive with the Big 12. So that's just going to be bare minimum, considering adding UConn.
Why does this guy have on shades? He is inside studio. because if people saw how beautiful my eyes were, we would never get anything accomplished, Connecticut fan. I have light sensitivity, and I have to have lights on both sides of me to light up the green screen. So that way I can appear in exotic locations. Jason Spangler says, I see revenue of $99 million for UConn on USA Today.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks like, hey, if you added the non-sport specific amount of 68 million, you might be able to make that 99. But the point is, Jason, again, that 68 million of whatever, maybe 99. I'm just throwing that out there because you're saying it. Most of their funding is coming from the school itself rather than fans or media companies. So in other words, the athletic department is not self-sustaining. It's reliant on another funding source. And almost all the rest of the Big 12 schools are profitable. Utah's extremely profitable in its athletic department. It doesn't need to borrow a dime from the school. It can self-sustain. That's what the issue that Arizona, the Arizona Wildcats have had too, because they have had losses in their athletic department. They've needed to go to the school to get loans and money, and it's caused issues. And UConn right now is in a position where they are almost 100% reliant on direct institutional support and donations right now. That is not a continuous means of getting money to be an elite athletic department in basketball or football. It's got to change if you're going to remain competitive. What do you think about that, Moan?
I agree. You have to make that move up at some point. That's why San Diego State was so willing to jump out, thinking that they had that Pac-12 invite. Timothy Green just wanted to stop by and say, hey, I've been in the hospital for a while, can't figure out what is wrong. I am staying dizzy all of the time as well as panic attacks. Can't wait to get it straightened out. Well, Timothy, take it easy, brother. Rest up. We got college football on the platter, so hopefully you're getting all that. Hopefully you get ESPN Plus in there. I don't know, but I'm sure you'll be watching on Saturday for that Pitt or PSU West Virginia game.
Get well soon.
Get well soon. UConn has been working on getting AAU membership. If they get it, UConn basketball to the Big. That's not happening. I will say
you don't think that
right
UConn
now.
to the Big?
No, I don't think that'll happen. The Big doesn't care about basketball, obviously. We haven't had a champion in 21 years, I believe. 21 years now. We haven't had a national champion, so they really just don't care. We're still waiting for our guest, guys. I see you messaged him. He has not appeared.
We'll see if we get him tonight. Yeah,
we'll see if he drops in, or maybe he forgot. I don't know. But if he doesn't,
you know what? We're gonna break out. We'll see if Mark can make it within the next 10 minutes. If not, then we're gonna break it out. We're gonna talk about like the big strengths, weaknesses, and you and I, Moan, and the community are just gonna get real deep on this thing to really see if this makes sense for the Big 12. It's gonna have a Big 12 perspective on it.
We can bring up the phone system as well and see if I've got the phones working. If we want to take some calls from people, if people want to call in.
Absolutely. I've got to hear the UConn fan perspective. I know there's some UConn fans in the chat stuff. Hey, if you want to call in and just give your perspective on the Big 12, that'd be great. Love to hear that and everything, because I'm still curious on where UConn's falling with all this. I mean, right now, UConn is in a pretty good prestige standpoint. You're the world champions of basketball, right? Like, I mean, the finances are the finances, but prestige-wise, you guys are on top of the world. Like, so what do you think about this Big 12 move, possibly?
JBaller54 says, heard this about UConn today. Their financial handling, the athletic department pays the state pays the university, and the university pays the athletic department.
So maybe there is some money that's getting handed back and forth that so I think that Jay Baller, I think that you're making the point that UConn's probably earning more than it looks like there with all the different handoffs and stuff. I haven't heard that yet. That's very interesting,
though. Shonsky says, wow, it's too bad you're laughing. In the 90s, early 2000s, if you went to the 7-Eleven and bought a hot dog and Big Gulp, you got 2 tickets to a Ute football game. Don't bet UConn.
I think that Utah is quite different than UConn in a lot of ways. Just the two schools that have completely different focuses. And like, hey, Utah had to earn it. Hiring, the whole Olympics, bringing the Olympics to Salt Lake City to build up the infrastructure for the Utes was huge. And also hiring Urban Meyer, and then hiring Whittingham and winning all the games along the line. So don't discount Ute success, Shonsky. I know it's tempting as a BYU fan.
Steve Moser says Big Ten is a volleyball and hockey conference.
And a money conference, too.
And a money conference, too. That's right. David Frame says UConn playing West Virginia at football, West Virginia playing UConn at basketball. So he's another one of the ones who wants basketball but no football. Here. You keep it going. Keep it going. I'm
you know what? Okay, here. So basketball. Decoupling basketball. Here's the concern with basketball overall. Like what's going on with basketball and why it's going to be difficult to get a lot of value out of basketball even in 2031. And the actual answer to that is really actually pretty easy to see. It's inventory. So football, if you're looking at FBS football, there's approximately like around, I believe, 400 games that are played per year, regular season games in FBS football. Obviously, most of those games are going to be on Saturday, more on Fridays, Thursdays, and everything else. But that's selective inventory that's very desirable for advertisers. Just not many windows to jump into. There's only so many games, so many times you can air it and stuff. If you look at Division I men's basketball, Division I men's basketball, if football, FBS football, has roughly 400 games in inventory per calendar year in the regular season, how many do you reckon that Division I basketball has in the regular season?
Probably about 1,800, 1,900.
Try 33,000.
Wow. Okay.
You're talking about around 400 games compared to 33,000 games to possibly choose from. A lot of those are conferences that you probably don't care about, that I probably don't care about as much, that probably won't be televised, but there is the opportunity for it to be televised. That's not to say those are all the games of like the P4 conferences and the most elite basketball programs, but there's a ton of D1 inventory. 30,000 plus games in the regular season to choose from. When you have that level of inventory, it's hard to really charge premium pricing when you can put something else on all the time. I don't see that changing in 2031. Like, if that's the case today, it's not like they're going to reduce games going down the line. So I have a hard time seeing basketball rights like triple, quadruple. Basketball rights for the Big 12 are estimated to be anywhere from about 10 million per school to roughly 15 million per school. Best case scenario now, right? Like that's where some estimates have been for Big 12 media rights for the basketball side. It's actually going to be like around more like 10 million. But really going forward, it's hard to see how that's going to triple or quadruple with the amount of inventory still there. I don't care who you add. You still are going to be battling inventory every night of the week and stuff. So that's never going to change. It's always going to be a problem. So I just don't see the upside on the basketball, the rights. Football rights are always going to have premium for a lot of reasons. Second most popular sport in the United States. And obviously advertisers went in on that too, because there's a prestige factor with football that basketball does not have. So they're willing to pay more for advertising rights and the fact of low inventory. That's why football rights are so valuable in relation to basketball rights, because of the inventory piece. If anyone can figure out how that could change, then that would be something to consider. But like, you could add UConn, you could add Kentucky, you can add every single one of the blue bloods in basketball, and you're still not going to make a conference where you're getting paid $25 million a year in media rights from basketball. I just don't see it in any which way, shape, or form.
Connecticut fan wants to know if we are anti-UConn. I will say this: I am indifferent on the matter. I am a Big Ten fan. You is the Big 12 guy. Bomber, who is the normal host of the show, is another Big 12 guy. So they have They have blood in the game. I do not. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not anti-UConn. I'm just anti. I don't know what the rush to add UConn is. I think you could wait 2 years and add them 2 years down the road.
Okay, so I think to answer this question, we should really get down to it and start taking a look at UConn. Okay, so I'm going to ask some questions out here. They're going to be more rhetorical questions. Moan, you can answer them. Chad, you can answer them too. These are the questions that I wanted to ask Mark. We're probably not going to have a chance to get to talk with him tonight and everything, but still, let's go through these because these are important for consideration of this. Like, are we anti-UConn or not? And this is completely applicable to you too, Connecticut fan, because like, is the Big 12 the best thing for you? Like, is it best for you and the best for the Big 12? So the first question that I want to throw out, Moan, you can answer this. I'll answer this too. Okay, so say that UConn were to come to the Big 12. Say this actually does indeed happen. What is the best case scenario for UConn at its program? What's the best case scenario going forward for UConn if they were to go into the Big 12 conference?
Go into the Big 12 as a basketball-only member for 6 years. In that 6 years, get some fundraising, get some state approval, get a new stadium built on campus, invest in your football program, at least start in the Big 12 in football in 2031, have your program at least built to compete. I mean, they're not going to walk in and become Big 12 champions. It's going to be too hard for them to do that. But I think if they could just have almost a Rutgers-esque type of build where you start off losing. You get your right coach in there. He builds a program. They've done it before with Randy Edsall. They had a coach there that built a program. He left and the program kind of fell off after that. But they've done it before. They could do it again.
Best case scenario, in my view, is that your basketball program doesn't take a step back. In fact, it stays at the place that it is now, and you keep winning national championships. Best case scenario, and then also you get more funding sources from the Big 12 media contract down the line and everything else. Your football, you can invest in it a little bit, but you can continue focusing on basketball, and all of a sudden you're just making more and you're still winning national championships. That's like, in my mind's eye, that's the best case scenario. That's why I think UConn fans, if I'm a UConn fan, that's what I want. Like, just win me national titles in basketball. Screw football. That's the means to fund my basketball program. That's fine. But we're a basketball program. I think that's best case scenario. Now let's go to the worst, absolute dreaded case scenario. What's the worst thing that could happen if UConn gets into the Big 12 for UConn? What do you think, Mom? What's the worst thing?
They put too much money in football. Basketball takes a step back. It becomes a negative value add.
Bingo. Yes. So if you focus resources on football, perhaps institutional support that was funding the basketball program before, you're nuking it over to the football stadium now. You have less funding for a 5-7 year period or whenever before you get the full media rights. Then all of a sudden your basketball takes a step back, your football still in ramp up stage, and you've got a more above average basketball program in the Midwest, not in the Northeast quadrant or anything, and your football program is still going to be a bottom feeder. That's worst case scenario. You lose fan support, you're not an elite contender anymore. And look, that could actually happen too. I mean, it's not too hard to see that happening, right? For UConn. Like, here's the thing that nobody's talking about with UConn too that's a little bit perplexing. Like, how's recruiting going to be impacted? Recruiting, like, I mean, UConn, look at the recruiting. They're getting a lot of Northeast kids. Look who they're playing. They want to play in the Northeast. There's no way that a kid from New York would want to go travel to BYU in Utah, in Arizona State, in Colorado. I wouldn't think so. I think they would want to play St. John's, Villanova, and all the schools in the Northeast. Like, you're changing your recruiting completely around doing this, and you're changing your travel paths and everything. It's hard to see how UConn is going to benefit on the court from a move like this. More travel, recruiting question marks, possible funding issues for the program. There you go. I just don't see like why that's a tough sell as a UConn fan.
Kansas has no desire to join the SEC. They have more money than they know what to do with. You don't leave where you're the king. Shonsky says UConn won the Big East in football and went to. It's not too Fiesta Bowl. Yeah, when Randy Edsall was the coach, they made a New Year's Six Bowl. Um, and then he left for Maryland to replace Ralph Friedgen. It just didn't work out there.
Let's talk about the Big 12's perspective now, okay? So we talked about UConn, like some of the risks for the Huskies on the Husky side. Best case scenario, again, they keep winning titles. They get more money from the Big 12, and they're happy, right? Like it doesn't really do anything. But on the negative side, recruiting changes, funding changes, and all of a sudden travel takes its toll, and you become a less of an elite program and in all sports. That's like the worst case scenario for the Big 12. The best case scenario for the Big 12 conference, adding UConn, would be keeping them around for 6 years, having that basketball program still win national championships so you can claim those. And then as your Mark is so dedicated into saying decoupling these rights because he thinks he's going to get a lot more out of it. Again, I pressed against that idea, saying with the inventory problem, it's a hard sell there. But like that has to be like from the Big 12's perspective. That's why you add UConn. UConn, the advantages, basketball, men's basketball, women's basketball, a massive market, and also good academics. That is why you add UConn. Those factors right there. And so from the Big 12's perspective, if they can maintain that basketball success for 6 years, they could ramp up football. All of a sudden, you've got new recruiting grounds. You get into the New York market. You can play at Rucker Park, make Big 12 basketball everywhere, the thing in New York, and all of a sudden it builds the whole brand for the conference. That's best case scenario. That's how Mark sees it. I swear that's how Mark sees it. He's a basketball guy. That's what he's going to want, right? The problem is the worst case scenario for the Big 12. The worst case scenario is really bad. Like that's the best case scenario is like, that's great and everything. Like we might be able to earn a little bit more money in 2031 in a situation like that, maybe a little bit more. But the problem is the worst case scenario is such a drag that it's going to taint everybody's earnings, like possibly now and certainly in 2031, if you can't get this decoupling thing right. So like the worst case scenario is UConn comes over, they have to change the funding, all the problems for UConn that has already been addressed. If they come over to the Big 12 and become a more of like an above average type program, they're not winning national championships. They lose this brand value. Kids stop wanting to go to UConn because it's not just the Northeast school anymore because they're playing in the Midwest. Then all of a sudden the football program is just a complete junker. Then like all of a sudden there's no value add for the future, like on the basketball side or on the football side in 2031. And I think that if you look at the most likely scenario between these two, the worst case scenario is much more likely than best case scenario. And so there's just all summed up, UConn isn't worth the risk. It is not worth the risk for the Big 12, especially with the ACC teams out there available possibly to gobble up. When you can go like in UConn, the downside's 2 down for the Big 12. It doesn't make a great sense for UConn either. It's just not a really good fit either way for a Big 12 school. I can tell you that Utah mentioned this before. Utah's not going to be supportive of a UConn ad. We don't want to invest in basketball. Basketball nets less than 20% of the media contract on average. We're going to focus on football and winning football games and competing to be a P3 considered conference. Adding UConn does not do that in any way, shape, or form. It makes you more like it's like the Big East. That's what you start becoming and everything. And you're losing your soul as a Big 12 conference. You're losing your soul and identity by making an ad like this instead of focusing on football. This needs to be a football conference and not a basketball-focused conference. Seriously.
Okay. I heard from Mark. Mark had a family emergency. He could not make it tonight. We're going to work on rescheduling him.
Sure.
I've got the phone system up if anybody wants to call. But anybody can do that right now. I'm going to jump in with a question here that I've heard Greg Pflugar brought this up on his show earlier this week. Is this Brett Yormark telling the presidents to trust him? Is this him saying, this is what I want. I got you the 4 corner schools. Now you have to give me UConn. Sure.
It's all part of leverage, right? He has got a lot of leverage right now because of his decisions. But this is a long-term move. Brett Yormark's a fantastic commissioner, but I don't know if he's going to be the commissioner in 5 years. I don't know if he's going to be in 10 years. Likely not. 15, 20 years, certainly probably not. Adding UConn is a permanent move. It's not like a henna tattoo. It's a permanent tattoo that ain't coming off and everything. So if Yormark happens to find another gig and hits the fan, all of a sudden this cultural fit ad and everything with UConn, it's going to be a cluster. And so, you know what? I can trust Yormark with some things, but this is too long of a term decision. It's not a good enough fit. It's just not. So I you know what? At the end of the day, he has to bring the proposals to the presidents and they have to sign off. And they're going to be responsible for their own jobs and stuff on signing off on something like this. It's very hard to support based on the factors that I discussed.
Well, let's put it to the people. We're going to run a poll.
Yeah.
UConn to the Big 12. And we're going to, let me put the formula out here first. This is UConn joining the Big 12 in basketball only, football joining in 2031 at the start of the next media.
I'm really curious to see what the folks think. What does the community think about this one? Like, is there something that is not being said that needs to be considered? Like some type of like gold gem or something that UConn's offering that we're not talking about, that we're not thinking about? Maybe.
Well, here was my thought too, and AMAC brings this up. If Brett Yormark gets rejected with this, will he have 1 foot out the door?
I would hope not, because if he has 1 foot out the door, then like really, how strong was that relationship anyway? How long were you going to keep him anyway? Like, if this is going to fracture the relationship with Brett Yormark, like you're going to make this permanent move based on making Brett Yormark happy? That's not a way to do business right there. Like, and the presidents have to make that call. Their jobs are on the line. They're going to be around a lot longer than Brett Yormark likely at their schools, or at least they want to be in academia and everything. And they can get canned for making a stupid decision like this if it doesn't make sense. And so Brett Yormark, hey, I just don't see him being the kind of guy that'd be so upset and miffed by this that he'd leave the Big 12. Like, he seems a little bit more certain about himself and pushing other things than
he definitely seems certain that he can break away basketball and make money.
He does. He does seem certain. It's just like when you've got folks like Bob Thompson pushing on that idea, right? Like Bob Thompson even tweeted like, hey, I just don't see it. Like you've got media people saying like, okay, that sounds great. That pot of the rainbow and everything. Basketball is going to be worth just as much as football and stuff. Like, where's that coming from? Like the viewership isn't showing that. The inventory is not changing. Like that's just pie in the sky basketball loving Brett Yormark talk. And like he's great and everything, but no one's perfect. Brett Yormark has basketball bias. You got to push back on that.
Well, I mean, he tried to add Gonzaga. We know that that was in discussions at one point. He's trying to add UConn as a basketball-only member. Do you put it this way? Do you think he doesn't see the possibility of the ACC being available to him right now, and he's trying to get UConn in before they are available? He's trying to get UConn in before more ACC teams become available to poach.
Which is a bit confusing. Like, is it a defensive play to hedge against any ACC out of UConn? Because the ACC certainly is going to be interested in the Huskies if, you know, they get poached or teams leave, right? I think the Huskies would be one of the first calls after USF. I don't know. I mean, like at the end of the day, I think you can boil it down to this. This is a really easy way to think about it. Like, does a move today, does this move in 2031 make the membership more money than they're making right now? Money's more important than ever. You are significantly behind the SEC and the Big Ten. You can't afford to take any pay discounts. You can't afford to take stupid risks and everything where it's going to dilute your shares. You need to make more money, and it needs to be a certain thing. And this is no way, shape, or form certain. There's going to be more money. In fact, it's going to be revenue neutral with just its basketball program's most important asset is revenue neutral for the next 6 years. Its football program, what do you think it's going to lift the value in 6 years after a ramp-up period? There's no way that football program will be dilutive. There's no way this thing makes any financial sense. Seriously, now or in 2031 or 2050. Like, this thing doesn't make sense for the Big 12. It doesn't really make a lot of sense for UConn either.
All right, we're going to give you about another 2 more minutes on this poll, guys. It is neck and neck. Currently, 53% say nay. That's how close this is. So
we've broken out like the analysis on Wilder University, like the models, like freaking ad UConn, right? Like it's like UConn's a no-brainer ad, but there has to be a human element to really challenge and push back and everything, just like what's going on. Data can say one thing, but you got to have that fit too. Is it a fit? I don't think it's a fit. and I don't think it's going to benefit UConn down the
I
line. I don't
I
see
will
him.
go out on a limb here and say sometimes you got to take a risk to get the reward. If he honestly believes, and he's had experience in the basketball world before, if he honestly believes that college basketball is that undervalued, and he thinks he can decouple them and get a better media deal if he builds because I mean you cannot build, and I don't mean any offense to the Big 12 when I say this, none of the power teams are leaving to join the Big 12. When the ACC
Unless the
falls
ACC
apart,
vouchers.
some of them will have to go to the Big 12, but they're not leaving to go to the Big 12 right now. So you're not going to be the top football conference. That's going to be either the Big 10 or the SEC. We'll have to see how those things shake out. But he has an opportunity now where he can say, if I can get UConn, if I can get Louisville, if I can get uh, Virginia, maybe UVA, if I can get these basketball brands into my conference, I can have the strongest basketball conference possible. Nobody can touch us. I can decouple it. I can get you more money. So let's say it takes your media deal from 31 million to he decouples it and combined it's 41 million. I know there's risk there. You're taking the risk. Is the risk worth the reward?
No, I don't think so because the upside isn't great enough. Like if it moves from front, like and that's probably more realistic. Like it might move like 10 million per year or whatever. If that's going to be the swing factor, it's just not significant enough. I just don't think so. I think that waiting for the ACC is 100% more a profitable venture for the Big 12, like than adding UConn. So it's just hard to see like the upside, and like unless basketball becomes as valuable or more valuable than football, which is really hard to see because the Big East contract that everybody was just gushing over a month and a half, 2 months ago, your main member now wants to get out because they're not going to make enough money. There's your basketball contract for your Big East conference right there. It's less than $10 million a year. We need to be realistic about what this is going to be. It's not like we're a genie and we're just going to manufacture 5 times basketball revenue. That is not realistic. You've got to be realistic about this. Best case scenario, maybe you do a double, what you're making now, possibly 2.5% increase. And that gets you to around 20 million max for basketball, decoupling and everything. And in the future, the Big 12 payouts are supposed to jump, considerably. The football portion too. So I just don't think that you should be focusing on adding UConn because you're going to be upset. You're going to be upsetting members too. If you add UConn and force it through, I'll tell you what. Like, how do you want your members to want to feel aligned with the vision of the conference? If you've got members that want to focus on football when football only adds, and you force UConn through, they're going to be so out the door if they have any chance. It could actually fracture the conference because of just a lack of vision of where this conference is going. There's not unity right now with this.
C. John brings up a great point. We need to remember football will only be added if they meet contracted thresholds. Football stadium ticket sales, Power 4 wins. In the era of name, image, and likeness, UConn can absolutely turn that football program around in 5 to 7 years. I will add, too, what about the intangibles that UConn brings?
Yeah.
The closeness to ESPN, the possibility of some extra funding through ESPN or additional benefits, say a Big 12 network. Do you think it makes it worthwhile if the intangibles are also there?
It goes back to the soul of the conference. The Big Ten isn't doing this. The SEC isn't doing this. They're focusing on the revenue-generating sport of football because it is the beast. I don't know why we'd even go play this game right now with UConn when the ACC is basically on its deathbed. I can't believe we're even talking about this. Last year, before the Four Corners came over, this made sense. Yeah, maybe Gonzaga, maybe UConn and stuff. If you can't get the Four Corners, become a basketball conference. We're far away from that now. And like the Big 12's in that third position ahead of the ACC. And this does not, if you're an ACC member, do you feel more compelled to jump to the Big 12 because they just added UConn? No, I don't think so. And so I just don't see it being a value add. I don't know how you shake it. Like, unless it makes more money for everybody and a lot more money, than adding other ACC schools like a North Carolina State or a Louisville, because you're going to have to leave somebody out from the ACC if you add UConn. And that, I mean, like, what's the cost benefit analysis if you miss out on Virginia Tech because you did take UConn?
Well, the poll results are in with 47 votes. Yay, 51%. Nay, 48%.
Dang. Look at that. That's exactly basically where the votes are for the presidents, too.
Yeah, I believe you need 12 votes total to add somebody to the conference. So, of course, they would say it was unanimous if this happened. But I would bring up you, and I don't know if you've looked into this yet. What about adding the New York City DMA for football? Do you think that offers enough value to add that, the number one DMA? You know, we're saying UConn football isn't up to the level yet, but 6 years from now, you're negotiating a new media deal. You can say, we have a footprint in the largest DMA in America.
I think that helps. That is one of the biggest swing factors for UConn is you get into, Hartford, Boston, and New York DMAs, all three of them. Like, you just get into a massive media market and stuff. We know how fickle, some of those markets are with having a lot of different teams. It's not like UConn's the only school they root for, right? Like, it's a hodgepodge of different teams. But that's definitely a value add, 100%. And like in playing games at Madison Square Garden, like, the Big 12 tournament would be held there and stuff. Those are cool ancillary factors. Does that mean more money on a media contract? Do folks out of the Northeast watch UConn football? No, they don't. We've seen that before. Over the last 7 years, they haven't watched. They basically registered in Nielsen ratings. So, yeah, you're adding a DMA, but nobody really cares about UConn football, even in the market.
Right, but you're not adding it for UConn football. You're adding it for your other 16 football. You're saying, do people in New York want to see Oklahoma State versus Utah? People in New York want to see Baylor versus Texas Tech. You've obviously got a ratings juggernaut in Colorado for as long as Prime stays around. But you just don't think there's enough value. What I'm getting from you, and I'm trying to give you every option, say otherwise, you just don't think there's enough value in the UConn brand to bring them into the Big 12.
Correct.
Okay.
At the end of the day, when you shake it out and you look at all the different factors, there's not enough financial value with the brand adding to the Big 12 to earn schools more money. My school is Utah. I don't think that Utah will be earning more money by adding UConn. And I think that it weakens your football more. So I think it's actually a dent to the Big 12 brand. That's the truth.
Okay, well, that's your take on it. My take on it is a little more optimistic. I think you if you really trust Brett Yormark, if you think he's done a good job as commissioner, you maybe give him UConn and see what he can do. We know that he's been out there pursuing Louisville. We know he's been out there pursuing Florida State, Clemson. He's obviously going through everything he can do to make that conference more money if he thinks this can make them more money. But I can certainly understand from a traditional standpoint, hey, we want to maintain tradition over potential future revenues. We don't want to have UConn sitting out there. Let's see here. Kuz is in the house. Kuz, if you want to join, just send me a message and we'll have you on.
Yeah, I wonder what Kuz thinks about this.
Yeah, if you're tuning in, Mark had a family emergency and couldn't be here tonight. So, but we will reschedule him. Let's see. I got to find Kuz in my DMs. Which is easy.
Yeah. So the poll was 51% community thinks that UConn will be a good ad, right?
Yep.
51%. So like right there at the 50-50 line. It's just a tough, what's expansion ads, it should be a little bit more of a no-brainer when you're adding a team, expansion-wise. I don't think that you want to be adding teams that are really on the cusp right that. Like Louisville, if Louisville were the targeted team we're talking about, everybody's a consensus no-brainer yes, right? Cultural fit, everything's fitting. It's like no problem, like you're taking a risk by adding another team, of course, and stuff, but it just makes so much sense. UConn's just harder to get there and stuff. And the Gonzaga idea is just absolutely crazy. Just even thinking about adding Gonzaga to the conference. Like, it just seems like Mark sometimes, based on his background, forgets or doesn't prioritize football the way it needs to be prioritized. Like, he says that even, like, he went to Arizona earlier this year and he was preaching about how the football program needed to continue improving and everything. But then all of a sudden, like, all of his actions that he really is trying to push suggest that basketball is the priority with your Mark. It's kind of wild.
By the way, I sent you that link, Coos. If you want to join, you're more than welcome to. If you don't, completely understand it. We're kind of flying by the seat of our pants tonight. That number is up there if anybody wants to call. You can call into the show. Or if you want to come on StreamYard, you can come on the stream with us as well. I'm open for anything. We're talking UConn to the Big 12 tonight. We've tackled, I think. I've made the. I don't know what more I can do to sell UConn to you. So if somebody in the chat has a better way or has a different option that they think makes sense to where that they could do that, by all means, let us know. But I have advocated for UConn a lot stronger than I probably should have, because I am an indifferent party. I don't have any blood in this game. Jason Spangler says North Carolina is the biggest no-brainer if they're available.
If they're available, absolutely. Geographically, North Carolina is a great ad right there. It has a huge brand, it has a football program, an elite basketball program too, elite academics. There's a lot of reasons for North Carolina being an attractive SEC or Big Ten target, for sure, 100%.
Brian Lewandowski. I hope I pronounced that right, Brian. Utah trying really hard to throw shade.
What? Like, I mean, if I'm a UConn fan, I'm not supportive of this either. For the exact same reasons on the other end. Like, UConn, like, it's hard to see life get better, outside the Big East. The Big East has been pretty dang good to you. Yeah, you've had to fund it through your school, but maybe that's still worthwhile in your mind. And like, so UConn's a title contender this year. Like, do they become that in the Big 12? Like, again, the recruiting and the travel and everything, there's a lot of risk for UConn basketball. I wouldn't feel comfortable if I was a UConn fan.
David Frame says only option for Florida State and Clemson is the Big 12 or stay in the ACC. The SEC is not going to take them, especially after Georgia smacks Clemson this week. Thank you. That's a great lead-in. At probably tomorrow or Thursday, we're going to have Wild Ute University. How does Clemson fit in the SEC video up for our members? If you want to know how you can become a member, just go to the little cash icon underneath the chat window there. You can become a member through there. If you're feeling magnanimous, you can gift a membership. You can also leave us a super chat to be read on the show. But most of all, we ask that you give us a like, a thumbs up, leave a comment, even if they're mean comments directed towards you. That's fine. You likes mean comments. Please, as many of them as you want.
Throw the shade. It's all good. I do want to hear like the feedback, both ends and everything. Like, do you agree with the UConn ad or disagree with it? Like, it is very divisive. A lot of people are holding each line, but it's definitely not consensus for either side, which is kind of wild too. Like, UConn administration wants it bad for financial reasons, but the fan base doesn't seem to want it.
All right, let's get into some criticism here. Wild Ute, your info only goes back so far. I've been around a long time, and before Big East was a basketball conference, their football was viable. Yeah, that was the problem with the Big East Conference. The basketball overruled the football, and that caused the schism in that conference. Steve Moser says a lot of risk in UConn staying in a league that doesn't pay out tens of millions of dollars in advertising revenue.
Yeah, it's easy to see why UConn administration would want this move. It's because it's a huge payday. I mean, like, you're making less than $10 million in media rights now. You're not getting really any college football playoff money, and so it's 4 times as much money going to the Big 12. It's significant.
Brian Lewandowski again says, well, when you were comparing Syracuse and UConn, you can't forget UConn did have football in FBS until 2000.
It's true. UConn did. It's an interesting one too, Moan. I know that Syracuse isn't available. You've already mentioned that you think Syracuse would be a great ad for the Big 12. Like that
Listen,
is something else. Like as a consideration. Like
I
Syracuse is
think,
Big 12.
I think if you add UConn, you can add Syracuse too. I think if you're going on UConn, you're going into that Northeast corridor. You're basically saying we want Louisville, Pitt, Syracuse, UConn. You know, I don't see him adding other. It makes too much sense to me. That's just me, and I know people will disagree and say Syracuse sucks and how terrible Syracuse is. Syracuse is a team to watch this year. I think Fran Brown's going to turn that program around. Unfortunately, he has Kyle McCord this year, but that's still an upgrade over what they had.
Wasn't he a 5-star recruit, McCord?
He was a 5-star recruit coming out of Pennsylvania. But keep in mind, he was a 5-star recruit with Marvin Harrison Jr. on his team.
Oh, yeah.
Having a guy like that on your team will add a star to your resume. David Frame says Memphis is a better football ad than UConn, plus Tennessee is putting a lot of money into Memphis. But is Memphis even safe to visit? I haven't been to Memphis since I was a kid, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you either. I haven't been to Memphis for a bit. Memphis is an interesting, though, ad because they've got a lot of benefactors over there with FedEx connection to that program. They're investing a lot in football. Historical basketball has been there, too. Big market, kind of in the Big 12 footprint. So, yeah, I mean, Memphis is always going to be on the radar of the Big 12. I don't know if Memphis is ever going to be in the a top 3 spot for that, especially with the ACC about to fall apart.
Asher Solomon, good to see you, Asher. Welcome to the channel. As a UConn fan, we overwhelmingly want it in a pre-alignment world, sure, but not now.
Well, there you go. Because I think that UConn, I mean, Asher, you could speak to this too. I mean, you probably see that you need the funding sources to keep basketball afloat. The phone, Moan.
Stormy Cyclone.
To accept.
All right, Stormy, you're on the air. Can you hear us?
Absolutely. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you all right. You say something, see if we can hear you.
Yeah, can you hear me, Stormy?
I can't hear you.
I can't hear you. I still haven't got it worked out then. Still have to work on that. What's up, Stormy?
Well, I'm on the fence about this just like everybody else, you know. I guess I don't see the big rush on this until you know what's going to happen in the ACC. I mean, they could be a fourth ad. Maybe you give Yormark that. Maybe he knows more than what is being led on here, you know, and these discussions or third-party talks with Louisville and, I don't know, possibly Clemson and Florida State. I don't see that either, but I just don't know what to think of this whole thing. But I don't think you can make a move right now until this has been hashed out in the ACC. I can see some benefits for the Big 12, some benefits for UConn. You know, I mean, if they stay where they are, eventually a basketball program is going to die of 1,000 cuts of revenue. Unless the school wants to just keep funding them, apparently. So I would just had to put that out there. I just don't know if you can make this move or if Yormark knows more than what he's letting on here.
That's a great point. We don't know what Yormark knows. We're only speculating.
I mean, I think we're all speculating at this point, but I don't know how you make this move right now without knowing what's going to happen in the ACC. Now, if you can get a couple schools, or let's say 3, because you want to keep them in pairs, I think, maybe you give Yormark this UConn deal, but until something happens, like I say, he might know more than what he's letting on here, but I don't see at this point how you can do this right now.
Wild Ute wants to know if you, as Iowa State fan, are supporting UConn, or do you think the school is supporting them?
I don't know. Apparently, there's 6 schools that are in favor, and like 10 of them on the fence. I would think Iowa State, probably the Kansas schools, probably the Arizona schools. I kind of think them 6 might be the 6, but I'm just speculating, just like everybody else. I mean, I don't really. I'm just torn both ways. I don't know what to think of this thing. I just think Yormark knows more than what he's letting on here. But I think this Endeavor deal is very interesting too, because they might be behind this, you know, maybe helping out this UConn deal. You know, I don't know. You know, there is so many layers like an onion in this whole thing. It's hard to peel back everything.
100%.
That's a good way to describe it, like an onion. It's a giant onion, and we've got to peel it all back. Well, thanks for giving us a call, Stormy. I appreciate it, sir.
Thank you, Stormy.
You betcha. Thank you, guys. Bye.
All right, we'll see you later, Stormy. Thanks. Bye-bye.
The great comments. Seriously, that's exactly where a lot of Big 12 fan bases see it. Like, hey, it's like an onion. You know, like this is so complicated. There's so many things. At the end of the day, you have to put all your trust in Yormark. Like, and he's trustworthy so far. Not saying he's not, but this is such a big ad. Like, it's a huge move. And like, I would love to bring someone from Endeavor on, have a conversation. Obviously, that's not possible. But like, what the heck are they projecting that we're not seeing? Because maybe Stormy's right. Maybe there's something there. Maybe this decoupling is significant. It's unexpected, possibly, but significant. I mean, Endeavor, they're not idiots. They know what they're doing over there. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough, Mon.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, but I mean, it's got to be figured out. I think people are saying it has to be by Monday. That's awful quick to round up another 6 votes.
I still want to know if the ACC schools, like a Louisville, if you are a Louisville fan, are you more apt to jump over to the Big 12 if the ACC ruptures with a UConn ad? Does that matter to you at all? What's the perception of like the outside too of this type of move? Because like it's got to be, the main focus has got to be nailing top tier ACC schools with UConn, without UConn. That has got to be the focus over the next 3 years. And so what is the deal? Like how do you see it?
MHS or MH5, excuse me, says, I don't agree with UConn ad right now. Wait until 2030, 31 and reevaluate then. We talked about that. What's the rush? Mosito says 9 minutes behind, adding 4 ACC schools does not add money unless you add another window. Does it really matter if it is Louisville, North Carolina State, Miami, and Virginia Tech, or UConn replaces Virginia Tech? Doesn't.
Yeah, that's a sobering comment right there. It's a good point too. I mean, Louisville, NC State, Miami, and a Virginia Tech are any. I would push back and say those schools provide more media value than UConn because of the football, right? Louisville, I believe, would have a higher valuation than UConn. Same thing with NC State, Miami, and Virginia Tech. Wouldn't you think so, Mon?
I would hope so, but I don't know. This is a great question. We need to get Bob Thompson on again and talk to Bob about this because, he's the godfather of this. He would know. Of anybody who would know, that would be the only person I could say could answer it with any certainty if he will answer the questions. But we might have to grill him on it and ask the question in a way in which he can answer.
I'll tell you this is crazy to me still, but the data, the realignment Big 12 model we built for Wilder University would say out of all these schools on the board right here that Ex Mosito has mentioned, the number 1 you add is Miami, number 1. Number 2 is Louisville. Number 3 is UConn, then NC State, then Virginia Tech. That's what the data says, based on the model. It's hard to accept. It's hard to digest. I'm even pushing back on it, but that's what it says. It's 3rd place. UConn would be 3rd out of those 5.
But you haven't done Florida State or
Florida
Clemson.
State and Clemson will be number 1 and 2 ahead of Miami. Florida State would be number 1 overall. Then it would follow Clemson, Miami, Louisville.
Okay.
Yep.
Trent Brown says, I was pro UConn, but Wild Ute brings up great points. I would think BY, Brett Yormark, would have some financial guarantees from future partners to promote UConn this intensively. You would hope. You would hope.
Is it really possible if like UConn doesn't fund the football program by 2031 as expected that you're going to like kick them out of the conference? Like, or just have them as a perpetual basketball member? Like, is that really possible?
I
you
don't
can
see that as
say
a
that.
possibility. Once you're in, you're in. It's very hard. Like the last time I can remember a team actually getting dropped out of a conference was Temple. And that was just because Temple would not invest anything in their football program. I mean, as bad as football program could be, that's what Temple was.
Mm-hmm.
So I think once you're in, you're in. Mosito says, but adding UConn lifts your basketball contract. I agree. Adding Virginia Tech to a similar does nothing to football or basketball. Adding UConn will not result less money on the contract. Adding Virginia Tech does not add more. It's speechless. He doesn't have it.
I'm speechless.
Memphis is a wonderful city to visit. Everything is cheap, and there's a ton of history there. Yeah, I haven't been there in 30-odd years.
Memphis is a great place. It is. Like, I think Memphis is an easy out at the ACC. Once the ACC ruptures, I think Memphis is going to be one of the first calls.
Oh,
you got Tulane there, UConn,
Tulane,
USF, Memphis.
Yeah,
Yep.
USF. Jay Baller says, still think Louisville would be really good. Good football team, pretty good history in basketball. Do we sacrifice Louisville for UConn?
No, you can't do that kind of stuff. That's what we're talking about. That's the biggest risk here is that you lose out on the Louisville by adding a UConn right now. Like, look, if the master plan for this conference is to go to 24 teams, and 24 is like, we're doing it. ACC is going to rupture. Let's just get the best 8 brands that we can get. Then this makes sense because UConn's probably falling in that. But if it's only going to 20, it doesn't make sense. There are other brands out there that you've got a shot at that are going to bring more value to a media contract into the conference that are in your footprint more for recruiting grounds and everything else that adds benefit to it.
Mr. Ed Wayner brings up a great point, which you just mentioned. We need to be thinking that Yormark is wanting 24 schools. If they add UConn, that leaves 7 slots. That will put a lot of pressure on middle-of-the-pack ACC schools when the ACC implodes, which you mentioned that. So, but Ed is thinking along the same lines. MH5 wants to know if Yormark has family at UConn. I'm trying to understand why this push is happening now. Well, all we can do is speculate. John Kurtz mentioned that Florida State, Clemson, UConn were all still on the table for the Big 12.
All of them are on the table. Everybody's on the table. Nobody's off the table at all. Like, look, Florida State to the Big 12, like, it's probably not likely. It really isn't. Clemson to the Big 12 might be a little bit more likely, but it's not the chalk by any means. But everything's still possibility. That's why you don't want to go all in right now with those. Like, if you land Florida State or Clemson or the both pairs in some way, shape, or form, the Big 12 is forever changed. I swear. Like, that's going to be a game-changing move financially, prestige-wise, everything else. And so you have to be in a position to take advantage of that if it ever to come. That's why you can't go grab UConn right now. In the future, yeah, if you're trying to fill out a 24-team conference, UConn might be a good ad at that point. Right now, it's tough.
Nate Simon says Big 12 needs to keep thinking on UConn, but wait until after the football season is over to make a decision. We have
Call from
William.
All right, William, you're on the air. What we can do for you?
Hey, just continuing the conversation about UConn.
Yeah.
So when I look at it, so I'm ex-multi-talks, so just so everybody knows I'm the Rutgers fan. When I look at this, and I think to myself, when you think about the ACC teams you're more likely to add. And let's just say you pick 4 of them. Getting those 4 teams, I don't think actually gives the Big 12 more average money. What's going to give the Big 12 is more inventory. You create a new window. If you actually pick UConn as the 4th school versus, let's say, Virginia Tech, football-wise, that contract, in my opinion, doesn't change at all. It's the same amount of money. What UConn does is actually give your basketball contract a lot more because you actually have those matchups. On any given week, that VTech game against another Big 12 team would not have, let's say, been a lot more, let's say, views or ratings on TV than, let's say, another 2 Big 12 teams. So I think that's where your Mark is looking at it, that he's adding something of value in the B-ball. But at the end of the day, it doesn't do anything to the football, just like adding another mid-tier ACC. I don't think it gives you something. The other thing that it does is that if it gets to the point where the ACC is going to implode and UConn becomes a viable option for them, you're more likely to keep potential ACC teams in the conference if you're bringing in somebody like UConn versus another team that they're like, oh, why are we going to bring San Diego State? I mean, UConn gives them some basketball. So I think it's also your Mark thinking, taking away UConn takes away something of value to the future ACC, and maybe that causes a Pitt to change their mind or ensures that Louisville joins. So that's where I think they're coming from it. Personally, I could care less about UConn. They could just die. I don't want another Northeast team, or let alone give Syracuse or Pitt viable future options. So, I mean, if I were the Big 12, I would do it just because I actually don't think that a 20th ACC team, whoever it is, actually adds value because they just be more of what's already there. You're not adding an FSU or Clemson as that 20th. So just my thoughts right there.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling in.
Good stuff.
Good stuff.
No problem.
Hey, take it easy. Appreciate the call.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.
It's a good point. Like the 4 schools that we're talking about, like, your Pitts, your Louisvilles, your NC States, your Georgia Techs, are they more valuable than a UConn? Like, are they more of a dime a dozen if you add them? Are they going to lift your media contract? Are they just going to make it for more mouths to feed? They're not going to make any difference or anything like that. Perhaps, I mean, you're adding some rivalries. If you get the backyard brawl, that's a synergistic ad. So I think you're going to boost the media value on an ad like that. But, like, it's a good point, right? It's not like adding those 4 ACC schools is all of a sudden going to skyrocket your media contract. Look at the ACC's media deal for evidence, right?
Sure. But you can also look at the Big Ten deal, adding Los Angeles as the 3rd DMA, the 3rd largest DMA. Adding New York City would be huge for the Big 12. Huge.
Yeah, I think that if you're going to do this, you got to go and grab more Northeast schools from the ACC. Because, like, with just UConn in those media markets, it just doesn't seem like a fit at all in the Midwest with recruiting or travel or anything else. Like, you need to hedge with many more ACC type schools in that area to make them make sense.
Well, maybe that's, like we said, 24 teams. Maybe that makes sense. You add a Syracuse, a bit more East Coast schools, more DMAs, more markets.
Call from
Crab cakes and football.
Crab cakes and football. You're on the line, Crab cakes and football. What can we do for you, sir?
Hey, I hadn't spoken to anybody in a while. I've been sick as a dog, so I figured I'd give somebody a call tonight. You just happen to be on it.
Okay.
No, I am an absolute no for UConn.
Okay,
for
tell us
2
why.
reasons. One is their football sucks. And second,
Right.
it's just they're not going to bring anything to the table. Basketball is not that valuable. Now, I will put one asterisk on that. You know, everybody knows that your Mark is a basketball junkie. Maybe he has some kind of conversation or deal going with somebody in the back offices of NBC or ESPN or some other TV network, saying that if I can deliver to you 4, 5, 6 major brands in college basketball, can we get this amount of money? There's a possibility for that, but I just don't know with football driving the ship if that's actually even possible. So now, and the other reason why I don't like UConn is because they gave us Randy Edsel, and I'm
Well, he was a winner at UConn. He was a winner at UConn.
He was a winner at UConn. He did not do a thing for us when he was their coach. I know that much. And it took us 10 years to rebuild after him. There was more to it, obviously, but
obviously, big year for Maryland. Loxley, think he's got that defense right where he wants it.
The defense is going to be stout. The offensive line, I heard today, is better than what we projected, but I'm still got a major question at quarterback position.
Right.
And so that's like half of your game plan right there is around a quarterback position. So we might regress a little bit this year, but next year when we bring in the 4-star quarterback that we recruited, if he gets on the field, I think that's a game changer for us for the next couple of years. So, we've done good the last 3 years. I'm not expecting us to be a barn burner this year, but I do think we can upset somebody, but we'll probably end up losing to somebody we're not supposed to lose to. That's normally the way we operate.
Well, good news is you don't have Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan on your schedule every year.
No, but the bad news is we got to go on the road to Oregon and on the road to Penn State. So they were like, yeah, okay, we'll take 3 away. Well, 2 of the 3 away. We'll give you 1 of them on the road, and you got to go to Oregon. So, but we do get USC at home. So, but I don't know. That I have to see the quarterback situation before I can really see what we have. And UConn, I don't think is going to give us what we need in ways of a test. I think Michigan State the next week after will. And then you got Virginia on the road after that before you go to Villanova, or we got Villanova. So we get 2 good mediocre tests, I guess, at best. But that would tell me everything I need to know. If we do okay against them, then maybe we have a decent year. If we struggle and win 1, lose 1, then we're probably going to be that 6-16. And if we blow the barn doors off of them, then who knows? Maybe we got something. I don't know. So
I think you'll be bowl eligible this year. I think they'll be bowl eligible. I think Loxley's built a culture there. I think that they're turning that boat around. And
we have
future years, Maryland's going to be a power in the Big East or the Big Ten East.
Well,
excuse me.
It took us 10 years of getting our butts kicked to finally learn how to play these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we played Michigan tough the last 2 years. We played Ohio State tough 3 out of the last 4 years. And then, but we still get our butts handed to us by PSU every single year. So, but now without the divisions, I think that's going to actually help us in the long run. And, and so with some of these schedules, like if you look at USC schedule, if you look at Penn State schedule, if you look at even Ohio State or Michigan schedule, they're a lot harder this time around. So they might take a loss that you're not expecting. And then if Maryland can get lucky and just win some of these early games, so let's say go 6-0, 5-0, we might actually be in the top 4. And what does confidence do for you? Because the last 4 games are brutal. And 3 of the last 4 games, in my opinion. Because you got to go, after you win the USC game, you got to do the Minnesota, then you got to do Rutgers, then you got to do Iowa, then you got to do Penn State. And I forgot Oregon in there somewhere. Oregon, then you got to do Minnesota. Or is it Minnesota, Oregon? Whichever way it is. 4 out of 5 games are brutal as all get out. So, start easy and hard.
Yeah, we'll see. I appreciate the call, Crab Cakes, and football. I want you to both from myself and you feel better.
Absolutely.
Oh man, I don't know what got a hold of me, but man, it knocked me down for 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's been
So-
going around.
Oh yeah, man. All right, catch you later.
All right, take it easy, Crab Cakes and Football. Crab
Thanks
Cakes.
for the call. Give that man a clap.
Yep, I forgot to put the soundboard on. At some
Let him
point,
cook.
I'm going to figure out how to get this loop back to work where everybody can hear everybody.
Let
on the
him
phone.
cook. Let him cook now. Let him cook. I said, let him cook.
At some point, I will get this worked out. It's just a matter of time. I thought I had it worked out physically, but apparently I'm going to have to do it digitally. But we'll get it
Give
worked
yourself
out.
a break, Moan. Give yourself a break. Hey, one thing that we haven't talked about with this UConn, and Crab Cakes kind of was hinting around this, and it sparked an idea over here on my end. So if there happens to be speculation, a media partner, a third media partner, that makes it worthwhile now to add UConn, say it's TNT. Say TNT, okay, UConn's added. There's enough there that I'm willing to buy into, maybe tier 3 inventory because it's so quality or whatever, right? They need content. They're willing to spend it. And it's earning all Big 12 schools a couple million more per year immediately. That's a different story. That's no longer revenue neutral for everybody. That's a value add. And so you couple maybe something like that, like another media partner. So games aren't on ESPN Plus, but they're on TNT or somewhere else. That's a big deal right there. And then also, Mark's trying to work the L-State 12 name out still. So the creative solutions are there. But if there's a new media partner because of UConn basketball, that could get a lot of yes votes right there.
Okay. C. John says Big 12 cannot follow the Big 10 SEC's playbook. I'm not comfortable with the ad, but I have to acknowledge the fact that UConn solidifies the Big 12's value with Fox ESPN as the #1 basketball conference.
I'm going to bring up this too. Okay, so is this a possible defensive play for the Big 12? I mean, I don't think that KU is at risk of getting poached right now. We'll talk about this after the call.
Call from
Replica.
All right, Replica, you're on the line. What do you think?
Good evening, gentlemen. Hope everybody's doing well. I want to chime in on this kind of conversation. I've talked on Greg Flugar's show about this as well. But you brought up a point regarding the decoupling of the media rights and him having a hard time seeing that the value can grow. I disagree with that. I actually think we're on the verge of, I would call it renaissance in college basketball because of NIL. You're going to see a lot more of the top homegrown talent staying in the collegiate ranks where they were going to the G League, going overseas. And I think even you could see some of the top European players come over to college basketball to become acclimated with America rather than going straight from the Euro League to an NBA team where they may not have a relationship with the front office of that team, may not have the best development plan for them. And I think, and here's the example I'm going to give, a Cooper Flag. For those who don't know, he's a young American talent. He was called up to practice with Team USA before the Olympics, and you rarely see that out of a high school talent. I think he is going to be the biggest draw in college basketball since Zion Williamson, Blake Griffin, and Trae Young. We haven't seen, the casual audience hasn't gotten a hold of him yet, but when they do, he is going to be a point of TV. And I think that's why Mark would want to add a UConn. You want to build a conference where all of the top talents, the top talents who can bring in more viewership than just the brand or the school itself. You want the Big 12 to be that destination. That's how you build up the viewership and make it more valuable so that you can sell it off. And the other thing is you need one of those cornerstone TV markets. I know DFW is a big market. I'm from the area, but it's not as friendly to advertisers compared to a New York City or Boston. You need that if you want to generate more money in the future for future contracts. If you want to have advertising, you talk about the All-State 12. If you have that Northeastern market,
that opens up more doors for him to operate and for him to do what he does best. Like he's a cold killer when it comes to business. So I think the presidents need to trust him. And I would just ask this one question to all the Big 12 fans. If you're affiliated with the university, just ask yourself, where would your school be without Brett Yormark? I think he's shown himself to be more than capable. And I think you just got to trust him. And I personally don't think that's going to change as far as the decision making with the potential ACC schools, because UConn football isn't joining in. It says the earliest is 2031. So if they're not meeting the benchmarks, what I think is going to end up happening is either they're going to have to drop their program down to the FCS, or they just won't get in as a football member. That's just the way I see it. There's no obligation for them to add a program that's not ready to be viable, if that makes sense.
Sure. Wants to know,
and I think
UT College is getting more Euro-based talent? New NIL?
Yes.
Okay.
And I think you think about guys like Luka Doncic, who was playing for Real Madrid up until he's 19. He came over and was fortunate enough to get drafted by the Mavericks. And I'm not just saying it because I'm a Mavs fan, but think about the alternative. Look at Trae Young. He went to Atlanta. They were trying to build like the next Golden State Warriors. That was the whole plan when they drafted him. And here we are 4 or 5 years later, they're in no man's land. Like if you're a young player, whether you're on American soil or international, you're trying to get to the NBA, do you really want to put your faith in these teams at the top of the draft every year that intentionally lose? Like, think about a team like the Washington Wizards. They have no plan to be successful yet. Every year, they're going to be able to take one of the top draft picks. Are they really going to develop him and give him the best chance to be successful? Is he going to have the best chance to acclimate himself to American culture? Or would you rather maybe take less money than an NBA contract, go to a college program, a big-time program, build up your brand, build up your platform, acclimate yourself, and maybe in a year or two, then you go to the NBA where you may have more control over who would draft you and things like that. So I think none of the situation is ideal. So I think waiting for the perfect situation, you may just miss out on something that could be good. And I think of all like the non-content creators, as far as people in the chat, like on these shows, peek around the corner, I think the only two people who really see what's coming down the pike is Jamie Thornton and Numbskull News. And we know Jamie's tied in with the SEC.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be serious about making basketball more profitable. That was a big reason why they added Texas and Oklahoma. I know they have their football mayors, but they are very good basketball programs as well. And when you look at the Rolodex they have now, here in a few years, they're going to have North Carolina, they're going to have Kentucky, Virginia, Arkansas with Calipari. Like, they're building that up. And I think with the tournament contract ending in 2033, you're going to see a situation where the conferences are going to try to take control of that tournament, much like the Big Ten SEC did with the college football playoff. And Sankey's going to need Yormark's help in making that happen. And you have to have enough leverage as a conference to basically put the other conference in a situation where they can't make a decision without your blessing, because that's how the Big Ten SEC got their way with the negotiations. No other conference could agree or make a decision without their sign-off. So I think that's part of the play, the long-term play. I think there is more value as we see more homegrown talent, more players just staying at school so they can become familiar. When I was growing up, you had players who were identified with the school they played for. And even though they may not have been like a top talent or gone on to become an NBA superstar, there's value in having like an established player at a program for 2, 3, 4 years. Think about what Jimmy Fredette did for BYU. Think about what Steph Curry did for Davidson, Blake Griffin at Oklahoma. I think it's undervalued, and I think there's opportunity there, but they have to show faith in him. And I think the last thing I would say is, if the presidents continue to push back, Yormark may start to turn his head elsewhere, because he can get work anywhere in the sports entertainment industry. And I think about like the Live Golf PGA merger that's going to happen within the next few years. What if they called him to run that operation? Because all they need is somebody to do the business side and to make it legitimate.
Sure.
And that's not the only league that could possibly poach him. So I think the schools need to show a little faith, and I don't think adding UConn takes away what the other schools in the conference, because everybody needs to win. There are quite a few underachieving programs in the conference, like Tech, Baylor. I would even throw TCU in there. They should not have gone 5-7 last year. So I think if the schools handle their end of the deal and they start winning, I think these conversations become a lot different. So that's just my 2 cents. And
well, we appreciate the call, Replica.
All right, have a good one.
You guys
take care.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So very interesting point. Like, so if European, actually, I've never even heard at this point. This is pretty fascinating stuff, Replica. Like, if indeed European basketball is possibly not shrinking, maybe the talent's looking at going to playing college basketball, could that lift college basketball to a new level that we haven't seen since the Michael Jordan days? You know, since like could the product become so much more valuable because of the elite players stepping into college basketball and the European ranks? Fascinating. You know, could that make basketball worth more at the end of the day?
Well, I think we've hit just about everything we could hit here. I've pitched Utah as much as I can pitch Utah, and you've served it back as much as you can serve it back. We've got UConn fans in the chat bringing up great points. Your Mark deserves the benefit of the doubt. He's earned the trust. UConn football will be back. Look what they did when they were in the Big East. I have one final point I'm going to bring up, and I apologize we can't get to more comments, guys. We're running short on time here. But I have one more thing to pitch UConn for. So the NBA rights deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. It looks like Warner Brothers Discovery is not going to be able to get that. They claim they've got matching rights. The NBA is saying no, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They've got money now. Warner Brothers Discovery does have money to spend. Could they possibly get in, if you add more basketball members, get into that inventory and actually overpay for Big 12 basketball?
That's the tempting proposition right there, because it's no longer revenue neutral. Everyone's making more money, whether you're with Warner Brothers, Amazon, or wherever. If there's another media partner that comes into play, that is something that nobody is aware of. No one's been talking about that. That's pure speculation, but that could be what your Mark's proposing with Endeavor right now. I mean, that might be the thing that we don't know, the black swan in the deal, right? Is that everyone makes more. If we were to add UConn, still Gonzaga's, no matter what, Gonzaga's a tough fit. Right?
Yeah.
But UConn, if it lifts the boat, look, here's the thing: is if it lifts the boat for everybody and makes everybody more money now and in the future, based on expectations, it should be considered. If it's revenue neutral now and there's uncertainty in 2031 about football, then it's a no. I mean, like, where's the value equation? Like, is it worthwhile to do? That's how it needs to be viewed at the end of the day.
Okay. Well, we will leave it at that, folks. Again, apologize. Mark couldn't make it tonight. He had a family thing come up. So we will get him rescheduled, and we will ask him all these probing UConn questions. Saw a lot of new people in the chat, UConn fans, whatnot. We do all kinds of shows here on the College Football Mafia. We got Big Ten shows. We've got everything shows. We've got all kinds of shows here. So if you're interested, by all means, please subscribe to the channel. Turn on your notifications. Leave us a like or even a dislike if you didn't like what you had to say. If you like what Moen had to say, give it a thumbs up. Leave us a comment. Any mean comments, you can direct them towards Wild U. We will see you guys next on Friday at 7 p.m. for our Big Freakin' Friday show, where we'll go over our picks for the week and what we're looking forward to on the weekend. And maybe I'll have the phone system finally worked out where everybody can hear everybody. But we had great callers tonight. I appreciate everybody who called in. Thank you. You've been a fantastic audience. Anything you want to add, you?
Go Utes.
Go Utes. Feel better, Bomber. Feel better, Timothy Green. Feel better, Crab Cakes and football. Everybody feel better. Everybody feel better. That's
Feel better.